Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast. I'm Rachel Fiori. Welcome and thank you for tuning in today. I want to talk to you about why your inner child won't heal and maybe even awaken you to the idea that it is not okay that you spend the rest of your life dealing with your wounded inner child. That means it isn't healed. We don't want our wounded inner child. We don't want our fragmented pieces of us that are broken, quote unquote, unhealed to continue to get triggered and activated for the rest of our lives. That literally means you are not a healed, whole person yet. So I want to make this clear that if your inner child continues to get triggered, that's letting you know you're not yet healed and whole. There's a lot more healing that needs to happen, that you need to move through in order for that to no longer occur. Okay. So if you know that and understand that, make the connection, connect the dot to understanding and having the realization that, oh, if my inner child continues to get triggered and activated, I'm not yet healed and whole. Okay. And the reason why I'm emphasizing that is because I see a lot of mistakes out there with traditional therapy and even a lot of, spiritually awakening people who talk about their inner child. Love your inner child, nurture your inner child, listen to, validate, acknowledge your inner child. When that little boy or that little girl shows up, sit with them, love them, nurture them, give them the time, give them the space, give them the validation, the acknowledgement, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on. And I want to make something very clear. If that is all you ever do with your wounded inner child, you will never fully heal and grow up and grow out of being a child, a wounded, powerless, wounded, powerless child. So I want you to really pay attention. The first part of seeing your inner child, acknowledging your inner child, understanding that it is in fact my inner child showing up and I'm acting in an immature, emotionally immature, like a 9-year-old right now, for example, or I'm behaving as a teenager would, or I'm showing up as a wounded 3-year-old who's really afraid, right? There's 1,000 examples and all different ages of where we were wounded, emotionally wounded. And that emotional wound, that little micro trauma, for example, did not get processed and healed. So now there is an aspect of us that is fragmented off. There's an aspect of us that is trapped and stuck as that 3-year-old, literally, as that 14-year-old, that now your partner or a situation in life or an unkind neighbor or something at work, someone at work, a situation at work, triggers and activates that piece of you that is not yet healed and whole, right? So when we understand that's what it means to have our quote unquote wounded inner child triggered and activated, and now I'm running and functioning as a 9-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 13-year-old. Okay. So I'm being emotionally immature to my partner, showing up as a child and then forcing my partner to show up like as my parent. Why? Because I have a mommy wound or I have a daddy wound. Okay. So we understand that part of it. Seeing that, here's the beautiful part about what we teach at Masters of Self University. This is part of what we teach in our coaching programs, only a small part, this piece that I just described, how to identify exactly What is triggered? So what programs am I running? And you connect the dots and understand, how far back does this go? Is this pre-verbal? Am I an 8-month-old baby? And the work that we teach and how to do this process at Masters of Self University with our coaching programs, that's pre-verbal, that's pre-memory. There's no memory that's going to show up to tell you that your mother was completely stressed out. She was emotionally traumatized. Her husband, she just found out, was cheating on her. And she is now insanely stressed out. She's brokenhearted. She's completely emotionally distraught, and that 8-month-old baby is getting the energetic imprint of all of her mother's emotional agony and stress. This is a perfect example, a real life example of what happens. That infant is so connected and bonded to mom, for example, that that infant starts to receive all of that stress, all of that energetic trauma, and an infant has no ability to process that. So what they do is they start to shut down part of themselves emotionally in order to block out the emotional pain. Now, this is a real life example, and you're never going to remember that, quote unquote. So the work that we do teaches you how to actually comprehend and understand, oh, that's what's trapped in there. That's why I keep getting triggered with abandonment issues in my partnership. If you can't identify that and you're not aware of that, you can't heal it. Okay. Now, let's take the next step though. Because oftentimes, what people are, and this is the biggest mistake that I'm seeing, oftentimes people will understand, okay, so it's an inner child. Oh, I didn't get what I wanted from my dad. He was absent. Or, my mom was emotionally disengaged because she had her own traumas and was unhealed. Whatever the scenario may be, okay? Whatever. We go to that little child and we acknowledge them and we validate them, like I was saying before. And this is what a lot of coaches out there, a lot of spiritual coaches or life coaches or whatever coaches are out there teaching people to acknowledge and embrace and accept their inner child. And here's the problem with that. If that is all you ever do, you are never going to heal that child. You are going to stay broken. You are going to stay in an energetic state where for the rest of your life, that 6-year-old and 13-year-old you and 7-year-old you or whatever, or 8-month-old you, all of those aspects that are unhealed will literally continue to be triggered and activated for the rest of your life. Just because you are acknowledging your inner child doesn't necessarily mean that inner child is going to heal and grow up energetically and grow out of these programs at all. Okay. And most of the time, that is not what happens at all. There's some very, you know, micro traumas or just some unhealed emotions that if that inner child simply gets some validation and acknowledgement, they're not severe emotional traumas or anything, then they can be alchemized with validation, being in presence with the child. If it's something's really easy, really simple, something that is not a big deal, did not leave a super strong negative emotional imprint. Okay. So for the most part, 97 or 98% of what you do when you try to do inner child wound work isn't actually healing it, isn't alchemizing, isn't actually transforming it. You're seeing it, you're acknowledging it, you're doing your very best to nurture that aspect of you and be present. And of course, we all know this one: be the parent that you never had, or be the parent that you didn't have in that moment. You could have very well intended parents. They could have loved you very much and meant the best, but we didn't grow up with enlightened parents. So they messed up. Bottom line, every damn parent with the best of intentions has completely screwed up to whatever degree they have, because they're not enlightened beings. We weren't raised by enlightened beings. So they made a lot of mistakes. That isn't blaming, that isn't pointing fingers. That's speaking the goddamn truth. We have to understand that. So we have a lot of things in there that are trapped and unhealed. And some of them are not that much of a big deal, can be healed very easily through presence and validation and acknowledgement. But I'm going to tell you, that is a teeny tiny fraction of a percentage of what needs to be healed in the majority of people when it comes to what actual transformation truly is. So when you are doing your work and you are learning from people about your inner child and your wounded inner child, the first step is to see, validate, acknowledge, be in presence. So a lot of people out there do that pretty darn well. And then they don't do the next step. And the next step is actually steps to alchemize and transform the energy so you no longer get triggered in as an emotionally immature child anymore. You are in adult relationships. You are conducting business with your as an entrepreneur or with your corporation or at work as an adult. We don't need children showing up making business decisions. We don't need children showing up making decisions for their group or their company or their department. Like, we don't need children doing that. If children were equipped to make decisions like this, children would run the world and not adults, right? So think about that. We don't need children activated and showing up as our world leaders. Look at how many of those really are showing up as our world leaders. People trapped in their emotionally immature, unhealed, wounded child aspect of themselves. So simply knowing that that's in there. Oh, look at, and a lot of times people will give their inner child, a cute little name. Oh, little Rachie showed up, or they'll call her or him whatever, a little nickname or something. And there you are. And every time you show up, I'm just here to love you. This is the biggest mistake that people make and why you'll never heal. Because here's the deal. That's the first step, but that's not the step of transformation or alchemizing. Here's why. When you, the adult you, show up for that child aspect of you, what you are teaching that child is to remain powerless. You're teaching them that in order to feel comforted, nurtured, supported, validated, heard, understood, etc., that has to come from you, meaning the adult you. Why were we in emotional pain or traumatized or hurt emotionally to begin with way back when we were children? What is trapped and unhealed inside of us? How did it get there to begin with? It is there because that adult was not able in that moment to sit with us as the universal ways of oneness, as the way of presence, as the way of compassion, as the way of unconditional love, etc., right? As the way of harmony with us when we were frustrated or upset or throwing a tantrum. They didn't have the high emotional IQ, the high elevated level of consciousness to sit in the ways of oneness as the ways of oneness in order to guide us through our emotional pain and teach us as our first divine teachers on this planet in human form, to teach us as children how to process our painful emotions, how, as the way of connection, to connect to our internal source of divine power in order to alchemize pain in real time as we feel emotional pain, as our feelings are hurt, when we're hurt, when we're frustrated, when we're sad, when we're scared. How do we, as the way of connection, go in and connect and actually transform and love and nurture ourselves with unconditional love and alchemize this pain in real time? We weren't taught that. So we already understand that's why we have these unhealed, trapped emotions, these unhealed, trapped inner child aspects of ourselves showing up as adults, as children, right? As immature children, especially in romantic relationships. But the problem is, because we didn't have that, if we did back then, we would have learned how to heal, transform, and alchemize our emotional pain in real time when life is unkind, when a person is unkind or unfair. We would have learned how to connect to our power, how to be the universal ways of oneness, and how to actually alchemize this stuff. So Here's the biggest mistake. People will go back and do some inner child work, and they'll sit with the child and they'll do all these things with the child. And yet they never actually teach the child how to heal him or herself. That's the problem. That's the problem. So the child learned way back when, oh my God, this felt horrible. This was traumatic. This was super emotionally painful. I'm afraid. I'm scared. I'm angry. I'm powerless. They learn those programs then. They learn powerlessness, that I can't do this. I have no ability to heal myself. They don't learn their own internal inner divine power. So here we show up years, decades later, connecting to our inner child and making the same mistake that our parents made. Maybe in a different way, but we're making the same fundamental mistake. We're not teaching our inner child how to connect to their own inner divinity, grow their power, become very powerful in that scenario, and heal and process and transform their painful emotions themselves. So if we are not teaching that part, what I call becoming the mystical parent. In our coaching programs, that's part of our coaching programs, learning what it means to become the mystical parent. So we can go back in time and go back to all of these moments, even in utero, when you were developing in your mother's womb, a day old, 3 months old, 4 years old. It doesn't matter the age. We teach you how to connect with the moment that there was a little emotional trauma, even if it was just a micro trauma, or major, major, massive, severe traumas and anything in between. We teach you how to go into that moment, pinpoint what it is that's creating all these programs that are wreaking havoc in my life, my love, relationships, etc., my friendships, whatever it might be. But then we teach you how to teach the child aspect of you to connect to their own inner divine power and to alchemize all of this pain themselves, to become powerful little beings, because they're divinity itself. And so if we're not doing that step, what happens is people will spend years and years and years responding to, nurturing, loving their inner child. But what they're doing is they're keeping their child aspect as a child, as a disempowered part of themselves, as a part of themselves that do not know how to heal themselves. So they're disconnected from their divine power. If that inner child needs you, the adult you, to always listen to them, to always be here for them, to always support and validate, etc., then what you're teaching them is to look outside of themselves for an adult, for someone bigger, more powerful than them, someone that they deem as superior to them. AKA, let me get the followers, let me get all my friends, let me get all the people in my life to constantly validate me, see me, hear me, acknowledge me. You are coming from powerlessness when you do this. No one outside of you on this planet needs to validate you for you to be validated. No one on this planet, not one human being outside of you, needs to hear you for you to be heard. Needs to acknowledge you, needs to understand you. You are the one who needs to learn how to hear you, validate you, understand you, acknowledge you, and stop coming from codependency, powerlessness, and weakness by seeking that and searching for that with other people, from other people outside of you. That is the biggest trap, and why inner child aspects of you will never heal. And for the rest of your life, you will continue to be triggered as an immature little child, especially in your romantic relationships. It's why people are trapped in, hey, I want to talk about, I'm really upset, something in relationship, and you immediately feel attacked. You're telling me I'm not good enough. Nothing I do is good enough for you. How fucking old are you? That's your fucking reaction to a mature person, an adult in the relationship understands and completely knows with wisdom, the way of wisdom, when there are things in the relationship that are a little unhealthy, there's conflict, there's friction. We need to go in, figure out what the root cause of this is, and we need to transform this so it doesn't slowly deteriorate our relationship and create separation emotionally and kill emotional intimacy over time, which that kind of stuff always does. A mature adult understands there's no attacking, there's no criticizing. Grow the fuck up. A mature adult says, oh, there's an issue here. Let's go in very deeply, find out the root cause, emotionally alchemize this pain so this no longer shows up in our relationship. It is literally a process of maturing and growing up, emotionally maturing and growing the hell up. And yet, if we are trapped in our inner child, we literally have no ability, no mature perspective, only an immature, wounded child perspective on what is actually happening. So we can't see through the way of truth, one of the universal ways of oneness. We can't see the truth. All we see is through my truth, which is you're attacking me. I can't do anything right. And you're showing up like an immature little child in your goddamn relationship. And then you wonder why the sex goes away. Who the hell wants to have sex with an immature child who can't handle things in the relationship as a mature adult? Think about that really, because that's the biggest problem in relationships. That is the biggest struggle. At least one of the partners is showing up regularly as an immature little child. And they're like, why don't we have sex? Why don't we have more sex? Because you're a child? Who wants to fuck a child? Come on now. And yet we're so immature and trapped in our inner children. We can't see that. We are refusing to grow up and grow out of our fractured off, immature, wounded, powerless little children. So we need to embrace those aspects of us. We need to bring them in and nurture them. Yes. But we also need to teach them what it means to be empowered. We need to teach them how. What is the energetic process to grow up and mature? Because that got fractured off. That's missing. Or I wouldn't be triggered as an immature little child. Immature, wounded children have no place in a romantic adult relationship. They're not ready. They're not mature enough. They're not healthy enough mentally and emotionally. They're not healthy enough to handle it, which is why they keep getting triggered and why they constantly feel attacked, which is why they're not mature enough to wash their own fucking dishes. And they expect their partner to do it for them like they're a little fucking child. Your partner isn't here to be your fucking mommy or your daddy. And we are so trapped as immature, powerless little children who were never taught how to grow up, who were never taught how to mature, because our parents didn't know how to teach that to us. They didn't know how to teach that to us. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So it isn't about blaming our parents or caregivers or whoever raised you. It is about understanding what they did not teach because of their own programs, their own wounding. They were showing up as immature little children in their relationships and in their parenting too. Hello. Of course, that's what was happening. Right? So when you understand though, and you learn this work that we teach at Masters of Self University, you move through our coaching programs, you gain the skills of divine sight to see the truth in all of this. You gain the skills in dissecting and connecting the dots. Oh my God. So these are the programs, the dysfunctional programs that my dad was running, that my mom was running, that whatever caregiver you had was running. And that created these particular groups of programs in me. And holy shit, now every time my partner does this or says this or tries to work on something in the relationship, I get triggered and defensive and act like an asshole because I'm showing up as an immature little child who's powerless. And I feel low self-worth and I feel insecure and I don't feel like I'm good enough and blah, 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 blah. All of the programs that get triggered, right? But we have to understand that just because that first part of learning that, which is critical and really important, if that's all you do, you will not heal. Your inner child won't heal, mature, grow up. You're an adult now. You shouldn't be triggered and immature little child aspects anymore. You're a freaking adult. For the love of Christ, you are an adult. Chronologically, your age is an adult, but you understand psychologically that there are pieces of you, parts of your psyche that are not adult at all, that are not mature at all. They're immature little insecure children. When you understand that your psyche is carrying that with you because you're unhealed, then you can understand, oh my God, and this is why I freak out in my relationship. This is why I think doing chores is something someone else should do and I should be taken care of. All of the crazy shit that destroys relationships are nothing more than programs, but they're programs of immaturity. They are a childlike way of viewing relationships and viewing life because we were trapped. That little part of us in that moment at that age throughout our childhood, those are fractured off pieces of our unhealed psyche. And so it is a process to take those pieces, integrate them, alchemize them, transform them so that you can be the spiritually, mentally, emotionally mature adult that you should be at your age. Okay. So I want to emphasize one more time that if you are not teaching, if you're not learning the skills, the methods, the process to grow that child, whatever aspects of you, whatever ages are unhealed and fractured off in your psyche, if you're not learning the process to integrate those and grow them up and connect them, teach the child aspect of you to connect to your divine power, this is an energetic process. If you're not learning that energetic process, then you are not alchemizing and growing up and growing out of your immature childish programs. Do you understand? It's an energetic process. So it is a process to learn that. It takes a little while to learn that and to get good enough at it so that you can achieve full, complete success, which means I'm healed from it. I'm now whole. How do you know you've healed from it? You don't get triggered anymore. You don't get triggered and start spiraling down into this victim consciousness, wounded little child, immature little baby who can't handle anything in the relationship because I feel attacked all the time. You don't show up as a child anymore, which makes you more powerful, which makes you more attractive. Oh my God. You want to know where the sexual chemistry actually comes from? And I'm not talking about when you first meet somebody and that's just all that lust shit. Superficial lust. Ugh. I'm talking about a deep, divine sexual chemistry. That can only happen when both partners have spiritually, mentally, emotionally matured into divine adults. Okay. And that is what you learn how to become as long as you're willing to do the work on yourself. As long as you're willing to do the work. Okay. So if you're willing to do the work, you can learn how to grow up and grow out of these patterns. So one last little, word of caution. When you hear people out there and their podcasts and their coaching and their therapies and their whatever going on and on and on about the inner child, well, this is what I do to my inner child. It's not that that's wrong or bad, but now you are more aware that if that's all they're ever doing, and especially if you've been following them and listening to them or learning from them, whoever they are, for years or for a long time, and their inner child continues to get triggered and activated, and they're not growing up and growing out of their inner child aspects, they continue, oh, the child's still showing up yesterday. You're following the person for 9 years and they're still getting triggered as a wounded inner child. Guess what? They don't know how to actually authentically heal themselves. It's not a criticism. It's the damn truth. That's not a judgment, but that's the truth. So if they don't know how to heal their inner child authentically, then you need to, and you want to heal all aspects of your psyche that is trapped as an immature little child, powerless, weak, they're scared, they don't believe in themselves. If you want that to continue to be your process and the way you show up in the world for the rest of your life, then follow the people who don't know any better. But if you don't want that to be who you are, then you need to learn the processes, the skills. What does it take to actually grow this child up? Right? That you have to, it's a set of skills to learn, and it takes practice. It's a process. So I caution you when you're listening to other people, it's not about judging them. It's not about putting them down. Don't ever go into your ego when I share this stuff with you. This is true spiritual education, is seeing the truth for what it is and understanding the mistake that a lot of people make out there when they're giving all this information out, and years go by and they're still telling you how they're triggered in their inner child. Like, that shouldn't happen anymore. If you actually heal yourself, you don't get triggered as an immature little child anymore. You just don't. It doesn't exist. You're healed and you're whole. Hello. So that's our goal. Anybody who wants true, authentic healing, that's the goal, to be healed and whole, not an immature little child who gets triggered and activated because they don't like what their boss says. They don't like what the CEO said today, and now I'm going to show up as a little child. Or they're showing up in their romantic relationships as an immature little child, and they're throwing their little tantrum, like, and you wonder why relationships go bad, right? So if you understand this, it isn't about putting anybody down or being superior to anybody. Get your ego out of this shit. Shouldn't be here at all. It's understanding the way of truth. And the way of truth, this is why your inner child won't heal. Because we don't have necessarily the skills to grow the child up and allow the child to see that he or she is a powerful divine being having a human experience. This is intellectual. This is energetic. This is deep inner work to energetically transform the beliefs the child has about himself or herself to become the way of connection, one of the ways of oneness, with his or her own divinity, and to grow that connection more powerfully. That's an energetic process. And when you are able to achieve that for your fractured off pieces of your psyche who's trapped in inner child programs, when you're able to teach that child how to do this stuff, they just alchemize right before your very eyes. They grow up, they grow out of the pattern. There is no more pattern. They alchemize, it dissipates, and that child does not get activated ever again. Period. It doesn't get activated ever because there's nothing to activate. There's no wound to get triggered. That's what being healed and whole really means. So I want you to think about that. And if you really want to learn how to heal your inner child and not just nurture it and talk about it and then remain a child for the rest of your life, who the hell would, I mean, I don't want, are you kidding me? I don't want to be a child. That's why I healed mine. I stopped at nothing to heal mine. So it is okay if you don't want to heal yours, but just understand the truth and what's going to happen in your relationships. They're going to dissipate and dissolve and be dysfunctional for the rest of your life because they can't not be. You're forcing your partner to be a parent to you when you continue to show up as an immature, unhealed little child. Who the hell wants that? That's not a healthy relationship. That's a dysfunctional one. When you understand that, now you ask yourself, oh shit, so there's more to do to actually learn these skills, how to energetically alchemize those fragmented off pieces of my psyche that's trapped in immature little boyhood or little girlhood. And it's just a process to learn. That's all. You can learn it. Okay. So if you're curious on how to learn it, make sure you go to mastersofselfuniversity.com, get a free coaching consultation so you can learn more. And then you can learn how to actually permanently heal the aspects of you that continue to be triggered and activated as an immature little child. And when I say immature little child, that is not an insult. Of course, you were immature. You were a child. Why is it immaturity now? Well, because now you're an adult. It's not acceptable to be 3 years old anymore when you're in your 30s and your 40s and older. Like, you're not a child anymore. So, those aspects of you that are fractured off, unhealed, need to be made whole. Give the gift of freedom to your wounded inner child. Set him free. He's been trapped in there. She has been trapped in there long enough. Let her connect to her true power. Let that child feel how powerful they actually are and set them free once and for all. Thank you for listening. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you're not subscribed, and share this with everybody that you know. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.